budget has to be framed in a certain context. And when the FM said, as she did say, that this is going to be a budget like we've never seen before, never in 100 years. But the fact is that we've never seen a pandemic like this also in 100 years. So she's not really exaggerating. She's entirely right when she says that it is going to be something that we've never seen before, never in 100 years, because we simply haven't had a pandemic of this order. But the fact is that when we're living through a pandemic, we think of it as a terrible thing to have happened, and it is, of course, a terrible thing to have happened. But the fact is that it's often compared to the 1918 Spanish flu. But if you look at the order of magnitude of the Spanish flu and look at the pandemic today, there is absolutely no comparison. In fact, I'll just give you some numbers. That the Spanish flu really killed about almost, 30 to 50 million people. It affected about a third of the world's population. And in India also, we lost about a sixth of our population was affected. About 1% of our population died. Whereas now what we've seen is that much fewer numbers, only about 1% of our population has been affected. And we've had to date only about 150,000 deaths. I feel a little apologetic when I say only, because 150,000 is a very large number. But the fact is that when you compare the Spanish flu with what we're seeing today, it is a fact that this is a much, much smaller pandemic, if there can be such a word. It was not entirely an oxymoron, that it is a much smaller pandemic than what affected us in 1918. But the fact is expectations are also higher. We're now an independent country, whereas in 1918, we were prepared perhaps as a colony of the Brits to be kind of not treated as perhaps even human beings. So today expectations are higher, much greater is expected from the government. We're no longer prepared to just sit quietly and take whatever comes to us. So the fact is that today when people talk about a budget, they do have expectations. So it's going to be a very tough job for Nirmala Sitharaman to deliver on the expectations. So we have to put the budget in the context of what we are going through today. And here let me bring in the latest GDP numbers that were released by the Central Statistical Organization yesterday, which show that the GDP is going to contract, mind you, not grow, but contract by 7.7% in real terms this year. And the nominal contraction is going to be something like 4.2%. So as against the budget last year, which thought that the economy would grow by 10% in nominal terms and somewhere between 6 and 7% in real terms, what you're going to see is a contraction of about 7.7% and a contraction again in nominal terms of 4.2%. So you work out the numbers, you'll find that the GDP at the end of this year is going to be roughly where we were in 2018-19. That means in 2021 March, we will be back where we were 2 years ago. So we've effectively lost 2 years of growth, to put it very bluntly. So it is in this context that the FM is going to try to frame a budget, and a budget which everybody looks at as something that is really going to be a magic wand. But the fact is that no budget can really be a magic wand. Also, we must remember that this is a union budget. That means it is a budget of the central government alone. And the fact is that in a federation like the Indian Republic, 60% of the expenditure is incurred by the states. There is only that much the union government can do. At the same time, things like health, labor, these are all, law and order, these are all issues which come in the state list or the concurrent list as per the constitution. But this does not mean that the union budget has no purpose. It has an enormous purpose of setting the direction, of saying that what can we do, which is the way we want to go. It is, of course, partly a political statement. It's always been a statement of political intent. But one very key factor which we look for in the budget is what is the excess of expenditure over the receipts of the government, of the union government, that the government will have to finance. And here the union government is a little different from the state governments, because union government has two things at its command, which no state government has. First, as a sovereign, it can print money. So even if expenditure overshoots receipts by a huge amount, it can print money. It is a different matter that endless and reckless printing of money will lead to inflation later, but it has this ability to print money which the state governments do not have. The second weapon in its armory which it has, it can borrow. There is no real cap as such on its borrowing, whereas the state governments effectively have a cap which the center imposes on them simply to ensure that borrowing does not go completely out of order. So there are two factors that set the union budget distinct from the state budget. So I think the first role and a new role for us in the media this time is to ensure that expectations are muted. We must remember there's only that much the government can do given the context in which the budget is being though, as I said, she's framing the budget at a very hard time, one of the big strengths of the economy is that it seems to be recovering. I say seems because the data that we have is very preliminary. And also the recovery that we're seeing, though many people have spoken about it as a V-shaped recovery, I would hesitate to really call it a V, simply because that when you have fallen as dramatically as we did, the first quarter showed the Indian economy contracting about roughly 24%. I mean, 24% is about a quarter of the economy. So after you have contracted like that, any improvement, even if it is still a contraction of about 7.7% for the year, will appear, I use the word appear, like a V. But it's actually could quite possibly be a mirage for the simple reason that I told you that we will be in 2021 back where we were in 1819. At the same time, the fact is that yes, we seem to be recovering. The economy is going to contract by much less than it contracted at the end of the first quarter. Also, many of the high frequency indicators and demand for cars and demand for two wheelers and demand for tractors, retail spending, all this is looking up. So, yes, fingers crossed, the economy does seem to be recovering. So, that is, I think, her first strength. The second strength is that agriculture seems to be doing quite well. For the past 3 years, we've grown at over 3%. Of course, agriculture contributes a very small share to the GDP pie, less than 20%. But over 55% of the population is still dependent on agriculture. So if you see a sector on which a large portion of our population is dependent, still doing very well at a time when all other sectors are contracting, agriculture is still growing at 3% plus. That again is another strength because it means that despite the GDP contraction, in terms of welfare, in terms of human well being, things are not as bleak as the GDP numbers would seem to indicate. So, that I think is a second plus. The third plus really is COVID related, is that mortality rates are much less than in India than seems to be the position even in the US, the most advanced economy in the world. The US spends about 19% of its GDP on healthcare. We spend little over 1%. There's no comparison at all. But given the, if you look at the absolute amounts, in terms of the absolute amounts that the US spends, and if you look at the kind of healthcare that the US actually enjoys, what it gives to its citizens, then we, I must say, despite our little over 1% spending, get much more bang for the buck. So just imagine how much more we would get if the government were to reprioritize and spend a little bit more on healthcare, public healthcare, as it must do. So the fact that our mortality rates are much less, the fact that Indians seem to be recovering, I think is a big strength. Because if we were to see the kind of numbers the US had seen, it would be impossible for any government to frame any kind of reasonable budget because the first battle that must be won is the battle against COVID and then the battle against a slowing economy. So I think that is a third plus point. The fourth really is that vaccines seem to be just around the corner. We have two potential candidates, and the best part of all is that unlike many countries, even in the West, we have our own domestic manufacturing capacity. In fact, our manufacturers could be in a position to even export vaccines. So, this I think is a fourth big strength that the Indian economy has at the moment. The fifth really is political stability. At the end of the day, whether you like the government or don't like the government, the fact is that the government doesn't have to ward off any threat of political instability. They're here today and they're likely to be here for the next 3 years. So that gives them the ability to take a slightly longer term view, not to take a short term view and say, after me the deluge. So that I think is a fixed strength. Fifth strength. The last, as I think, is that expectations all said and done, despite what people talk about, people realize that this is not a budget from which you can expect too many goodies. We all like goodies, but at the same time, we have to understand that the government is not in a position to just hand out goodies, because at the end of the day, there always is some day of reckoning to come. And the last thing I think is a strength for the FM really is that Indians, we're always good at crisis management. Come a crisis and somehow we rally around and kind of come out of it. But once that crisis is over, we go back to, business as usual, complacency, etc. So today, since we're in the midst of a crisis, government, citizens, corporates, all of us, I think, will be able to manage the crisis much better. I think she has a terrible job, kind of trying to walk on a tightrope when you have at that height, when you have, either way, you have three scenes, a devil and the deep sea, literally. So I think the first weakness that she really has is the same economy, which she spoke of as recovering. But mind you, it's still a very weak economy. It's all very well to say that we're recovering. But if you have an economy which in nominal terms is back where we were 2 years ago, then where does she find the revenues? There are many things that she would like to do, perhaps. Spend on infrastructure, spend on defense. As you said, we have a huge neighbor to our east, one with whom we don't have the best of ties. So she really needs to find money for humongous spending on many, many fronts. At the same time, she knows that if the economy is weak, she's not going to get those tax revenues. So where does she find the money from? So that really is the first weakness, the first fact that we have such a weak economy. The second weakness, which any democratically elected government must, really worry about, is that inflation is high. It has been at over 6 to 7% for close to 9 months now. Not very long ago, we saw a government being booted out because of high onion prices. And though, as I said, you do have political stability, the government has 3 years more to go. The fact is, inflation hurts people, it hurts the poor most of all. And where it hurts them most of all, in their stomachs, because where we've seen is that in this high inflation, food prices have been particularly high. So, high inflation is something that must always worry her, because even as she wants to spend, she knows that if she continues to spend recklessly, inflation, which is already high, could go up further. And that is something that no population is ever going to forgive her. Yes, 3 years is a long time. Human memories are short. But if you are hurt very badly and in your stomach, you're unlikely to forgive the government. So, as I said, limited resources, high inflation. So, she cannot really do what many other countries can do. So, she has to look very hard for alternate sources of revenue. If you don't have tax revenues, what do? You have to look for non tax revenue. There, essentially, in our country means disinvestment. But as we've seen, the government has somehow not been able to do what it can do on the disinvestment front. So, that I think is another big weakness of the present government, that they have not been able to realize the potential from disinvestment, what they could really do. The government owns a number of blue chips. If only they could disinvest at a time when private corporates have been able to raise money hand over fist. Every day we hear the Sensex setting new records. And you wonder, why is it that the government is not able to cash in? If small time companies are able to raise money like this, what about government of India, which is like a colossus really as compared to these small companies? But somehow they've not been able to do that. And last, I think something that I worry about, which is not really in the financial domain, is the polarization that we're seeing, whether it is because of social media or whatever the reason, the kind of polarization that you're seeing, not just in India, but all over the world, the US being the prime example, as a result of which it becomes very difficult for the government to push through any other kind of structural reforms that everybody talks about. We keep saying that the government must do more, they must go in for structural reforms, but just see what has happened. They've attempted structural reforms in the agriculture area with the farm laws. They've attempted structural reforms in the labor area, but just see what's happened. So it becomes very difficult for a government to do anything of the kind of order that is required when you have this kind of polarization of society. One huge opportunity that the COVID pandemic has thrown is really the opportunity to capitalize on all the investment which earlier was flowing into China and now is looking for alternate sources. So India could be destination. So India could be a huge opportunity for all these companies which today are, little wary, little hesitant about expanding in China. So this is an opportunity because India really missed out on being part of the global supply chain. Unfortunately, a lot of the companies that are leaving China are going to countries like Vietnam, like Cambodia, like Indonesia, Thailand, and not really Bangladesh also, not really coming into India. The fact is, in a democracy, it is extraordinarily difficult to do business. As I said, if you are a company which is doing business, say in Haryana, and you needed to get your goods to, say, IGI in Delhi, and the farmers are blocking the way, what do? No overseas buyer is going to say agree to your plea that look, the farmers are blocking the road, they have a right to agitate, so please give me some more time. So these are factors. Democracy does become a hindrance, quote unquote, at times when you want to deliver. The second opportunity really is the fact that we have a huge sunrise sector. IT was always seen as a sole sunrise sector in India, but now we have another sunrise sector, pharma, which nobody really gave a chance for all these years. Yes, we had many pharmaceutical companies in India, but we never thought that they would really become a sunrise sector to compete with IT. But today, what we are seeing is that Indian pharma is now not just because of the vaccines, but also in terms of therapeuticals, in terms of PPEs, in terms of masks. Remember when we announced the lockdown, we didn't have enough masks, we didn't have enough PPEs, we barely had enough ventilators. In fact, people didn't even know how to use a ventilator. But in just these 9 months, it is enormous credit of Indian industry that we are today exporting PPEs, we're exporting masks, so Indian medicines. So this is a fact we've realized that it's not correct to be dependent on raw ingredients for pharmaceuticals on China. So we now have the ability to export not just the final drug, but also the ingredients. I think so. The fact that we have a new sunrise sector is a huge opportunity. The third opportunity, if I could call it thus, so is that it's brought home very dramatically the importance of public health care. What COVID has revealed is the kind of expenditure that we have done on public healthcare is a pittance. It is ridiculous that we're not able as a country to spend more than 1% of our GDP on public healthcare. So this is an opportunity. Never waste a crisis is something that is often said. It sounds cliche, but it's very true. The fourth opportunity really is that we have a huge deficit of infrastructure. This is an opportunity that the government should exploit, because infrastructure, when you spend on infrastructure, it kills two birds with one stone. A, you get a road, you get a bridge, you get a canal which didn't exist in the past. So you have actual physical infrastructure. The second thing is that who do you employ in building these roads, bridges, canals? You employ unskilled labor. So in terms of job potential, in terms of creating jobs for millions of people, infrastructure is the one area where the government could spend on and kill two birds with one stone. Create that road which establishes connectivity, create that bridge, create that canal which enables you to irrigate your farms, at the same time provide jobs to millions of people. The next opportunity really is that there's plenty of money in the world, thanks to central banks really opening the tap big time. There is no dearth of money floating around in the world. So this is the time when the government can attract all this money into our infrastructure, use it to spend. So the fact that there's plenty of liquidity is again a big, big plus. And the last opportunity, as I said, is that the government is the owner of so many blue chips. I was just reading today that LIC of India is going to record a phenomenal profit. 33,000 odd crores is what they're going to record. So when you have something like that, the government already spoke last year of disinvesting LIC. Imagine the kind of money that you could get. So I would say the opportunity is there in disinvestment. So disinvest as if your tail were on fire. If you were to do that, that would be a huge opportunity. Not only would you get the money, you would bring in some kind of private sector work ethics into the public sector. And that would be a huge game changer for the Indian economy. For some reason, they seem very scared of spending big time the way they should. Virtually every other country in the world has used this opportunity, quote unquote, to support the economy by, if necessary, printing money, if necessary, by, as I said, monetizing the deficit, if necessary, by spending, borrowing, doing whatever it takes to somehow ensure that the economy is supported. This government, for whatever reason, possibly it's fear of the rating agencies, but that's really a bogey. So the big threat that I see is that she will again buckle down to the fear of what rating agencies might say. Even though when every other country has got huge fiscal deficits, our fiscal deficit looks very good in comparison. So that is my fear, that the threat that she will see, an imagined threat in what rating agencies can hold out against her, saying that can keep your fiscal deficit under control at a time when there really is no need. Because what is more important is which comes first. If you were to spend, sure, your fiscal deficit will increase. But if as a result the economy were to improve dramatically, then next year you can get your fiscal house back in order. So the first threat that I see is the government's somehow fear, somehow anxiety not to really overdo the fiscal spending as it were at a time when it's necessary to even overdo it. The next threat, as I see, as I said, which I've spoken about earlier, is inflation, which is a threat. It is a genuine threat, which we need to keep in mind. So that's again a second threat. The third threat really is a second wave of COVID. We've seen it happen all over the world. And God forbid, if it were to come to India, we really do not know whether the so-called V-shaped recovery, which I think is going to be more a U than a V, whether that will really scupper all government's plans. We really have to keep our fingers crossed. We've already seen a mutated variant in the UK, and we are seeing people in India. reporting the new variant. So we'll have to see whether that really hits us in the big time, or will we really be able to have the kind of success, quote unquote, with the mutant variety as we have had against the first? That again, I think, is a worry. Another threat we have spoken about, which I won't elaborate again, is polarization of society. Another threat really is from the external world. We've seen countries all over the world turning increasingly protectionist. Of course, now with Trump gone, I would say virtually gone, hopefully he will go after this. There is no question of his not going. Whether Biden will become any more, multilateral in his approach, or whether he will continue the inward look that Trump had. Overnight, we can't expect him to really unravel all that Trump has done. And because of COVID, we are going to see many countries in the world, if not only the US, remain protectionist largely. May not be as much as Trump, and global trade overall is going to shrink when the global economy is also going to shrink. So that is a threat. So stagnation in world trade. And last but not the least, and this of course is not in the economic arena, is the fact that we live in a very unstable part of the world. The subcontinent is not the best when you talk in terms of political stability, in terms of military threats, in terms of terrorist threats. So that is something that she has to bear in mind, even though it's not of immediacy as far as the budget is concerned. So she'll have to set aside perhaps larger amounts to the defense budget than she would if we were, say, Australia. The fact is that we're living in a country when we have hostile neighbors on both sides, so it's important that we do not relax our guard on defense. So unfortunately, we will have to spend on defense at a time perhaps when given a choice, we would perhaps take away from defense and spend on public health and perhaps education also. So these are all the threats that she has to keep in mind when she frames her budget.